Good evening, good evening. Welcome to GC Mackay's Book Club. I'm GC Mackay. Episode 2, I mean technically it's episode 3, but whatever. Ernesto Sabato's The Tunnel. Well, since you've all gathered round so quickly to have a discussion. Sorry I'm late, by the way. Busy boy. That's good. That's good. This is the wine of the evening. I have to admit, Barefoot, pretty good overall. I've always enjoyed. I never feel disappointed when I buy one of their Malbecs, or the Merlot actually. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into it. Yeah, Ernesto Sabato's The Tunnel. I have spoken about this book before, quite a lot actually. I've always been a massive fan of it. I remember when I first saw the cover, which you can see there, but I'll show it here as well just for the fucking... Saw this in a bookshop and I was just immediately drawn in by that. I don't know, something about it. I really love the subtlety and yet what it's saying as well. There's an element of like, you can kind of sense the fact that he wants to dominate and yet she's using this femininity, and you can see that she's got the wedding band, so it's like, but I don't know, I suppose maybe I've got the bias because of obviously having read it, I know that, you know, that's not his wife, or it's not trying to imply that. But there's another, I think there's a Stereophonics of all fucking bands cover. I might be wrong about the band, but it's basically a similar scenario of a couple in a station and they're kissing, but the girl's like this kind of thing. It's a fucking brilliant cover. Yeah, maybe that was actually part of the reason I was very drawn in by this one, although I actually prefer this one because I think it's got more artistic merit to it, personally speaking. And it's not like I'm a big fucking book cover kind of type. I don't really think it matters all that much, but there are exceptions, and I think this one is probably my favourite actually. I can't really think of another that encapsulates and portrays the book so well. I don't know if you have any well, it must be a long time ago, I never heard you mention it. Well, actually, if you're on that subject, this is what I wrote about it, and there is a link to it, so I'd imagine you could still, you know, watch that, because it's only unlisted. Reads like the illegitimate love child of Camus and Dostoevsky after a night of the profoundest debauchery. Felt more exposed by the writing than if I were to run through the dilapidated streets of my hometown buck naked, lathered in low-grade olive oil. Absolutely adored it. And that is what I said. That can't be right. Nah. I must have written that That can't have been then. I don't know when I wrote it, but it was definitely not in 2023. That's fucking taking the piss. I think it was more 2020, I think. Because I'm sure I read it. Yeah. I know where I was living, and yeah, definitely. That's total nonsense. Not sure why that's there. But yeah, the book in question was published by was published in 1948 originally, I believe, in some sort of serial magazine, something like that. But I only really mentioned the date because Camus actually did have good things to say about it. Although I kind of wonder whether that was somewhat self-serving because, yeah, The Outsider was published, I think, I know it was during World War Two, possibly a year or two into it. Don't quote me on that. But when I first saw it, I thought, I'm sure that, yeah, The Stranger, El Stranger, was, published quite a few years before at least. And there are similarities in the novel, especially in the existential sense. Although I would argue that The Tunnel has a far more nihilistic look. Actually, which is funny to say, really, because I would say that Mucho in The Stranger is very nihilistic. But I think in terms of philosophy in The Tunnel, it certainly is more so. Or at least maybe it's more fatalism than anything else. There's a definite despair at the meaninglessness of it all, which again Mucho has, but he's a bit more indifferent about it himself, whereas I think Juan Pablo Castel has, yeah, the kind of more artistic fancy behind it. He actually is pained by the pointlessness of everything, which I think makes him slightly more relatable, actually, in some ways. Although I would argue that both characters are still pretty relatable overall. It just depends on what's going on in your life, and yeah, if you're focused on a woman in this instance who is somewhat indifferent to you, then it kind of changes the outlook in comparison of these two novels, at least. It definitely inspired Heather in the sense that I wanted to try and get a similar tone, but also, if you really want to know, it's the length of the chapters I was actually drawn in by. I thought, oh, okay. And there is a homage to it if you're interested to know, because he uses Roman numerals, or the publisher did, for each chapter. And for those of you who've read Heather, that is what I did as well. And that was a nod, though. I mean, it's not exactly like taking anything about the themes or style or whatever, but yeah, there's a couple of clear influences. I think definitely when it comes to Castell and how fucking much of a lunatic he is without quite realizing it is also similar, and that's probably it. I mean, maybe in terms of, like, if he was put in the modern world, he would probably have a lot of similarity to someone like Michael Harlow, but there's a pomposity to him that I think escapes even him at times. Like, his whole, like, for someone who looks down on a lot of humanity, that is still putting yourself on quite a big pedestal in terms of, like, you know, feeling the freedom to judge. And although he makes, you know, compensation for that in the verbal sense, there is a definite other feeling of superiority, at least like innate within him. You could read this, like I was kind of wondering in some senses, and I'll do a bit of a reading if you fancy it. I kind of wonder from Sabato's point of view whether the whole book is about the struggle for art, in a sense, or at least like the pain of creation as a man, especially, but anyone really. And what I mean by that is more, if we take the creative process and we put it into someone like Maria, who is obviously Castell's main focus, it's as if he's trying or aiming for perfection, essentially. And I think anyone who gets into the endeavor of creativity will be thoroughly destroyed by this thought process. It's like you're trying to get it as good as you can to the point where it is, well, a masterwork, let's say, or a magnum opus or whatever. But it's also asking something of the creative process that the creative process cannot grant, you know. So it's like the madness that you lose yourself in is mainly very emblematic of the struggle behind it in general. And I think a lot of heteronormative males, let's say, would or just heterosexual males would definitely utilize a female figure as the ideal perfection, because we have, you know, it's like the Madonna whore complex, I suppose you could go into. But I think it's more than that. And in metaphorically speaking, I think the tunnel is about trying to achieve perfection, even though you know it's impossible. And it's taking the beautiful and turning it ugly, and vice versa, and things like that. Or at least that's one way you could look into it. I was trying to like analyze what exactly was the drive behind the writing, I suppose. And I got a few similarities with something like House of Leaves, for instance, where the main kind of wink part of it is, you know, the endless avenues you'll go down trying to create a perfect piece of art, and yet none of them will ever satisfy. And I suppose it's probably the same when it comes to any kind of endeavor, really. But there is a definite madness involved, you know. But probably in the same way where an entrepreneur would get so money obsessed that no matter how much he or she makes, it's never enough. They always need that big chase. They always need to keep trying to improve, and it's similar in some ways, because you're always trying to find, yeah. And there is definitely a consensus to this. The Outfit is a film I think I briefly spoke about, which I'd recommend, but it's a similar thing where you go into an endeavor, you do the best that you can do with it, you know, striving for perfection, but after a while knowing that will never happen, basically. And during this read of it, I felt like the tunnel itself was almost like an admission of that journey, that very lonely, isolated, alienating, and suffocating vessel, as it were. But that is just looking at it from a certain angle, I suppose. I could also look at it as just the ramblings of a megalomaniacal lunatic quite a lot of the time. I mean, maybe it was because it was like the third reading of mine by now. I mean, at least. He gets a bit more grating the more you read his thoughts, and the way he assesses things, the way he tries to dominate Maria from the off. Like, there's no fucking about. But there's also this kind of weird vulnerability to him. I mean, maybe it's because we've been reading Elliot fucking Roger. But if Elliot Roger had a brain, I think this is the kind of novel he would come up with. You know, if he could actually articulate his thoughts in a precise and thought-provoking manner, this is the kind of book he needed to read, really. And I would stand by that overall. And I mean, he needed to read a lot of books, but this one would have helped him, I think, because he would have been like, oh shit, I think like this a bit. I think I'm, you know, special or unique or whatever. And so does this motherfucker, you know. And he doesn't even realise how he's basically just being used and whatever. But and the other, I suppose, devil's advocate kind of thought reading this, I was actually kind of questioning whether Maria wanted what happened to her a little bit. I don't know whether she had a bit of a death wish, because she'd certainly played with fire, and getting involved with such a man, her indifference, whether she was actually kind of laughing behind his back, you don't really know. But then when you do realise, you know, her current commitment, let's say, as just one thing, and the way she kind of behaves, she goes from hot cold all the time, and you could see that as her being somewhat afraid of him, which would be understandable. I get that, but at the same time, she keeps kind of teasing it. And I'm not saying she's asking for it necessarily, but maybe there was a part of her that wanted to see how much she could push a man, essentially. And I definitely think this isn't anything too original, to be honest, but it's subtly done in it. I mean, she warns him, I only ever hurt people, I do this, that, the other, you know. Then she acts and does whatever the fuck she wants. She disappears, she comes back, she plays it up. I mean, there's one passage in it where it basically, like, he kind of admits that the only way to kind of get any control over her is to force her on the bed, all that kind of stuff, and that's the only time she seems to react. She's fucking nuts as well, I would say. But I also kind of think maybe her own lunacy is the fact that she wanted to see how far she could push such a man, and even at the end it's like she accepts it. It's like she wants it almost. I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty out there thought, I suppose, but yeah, when you've read something a couple of times already, you're kind of looking at other things, and yeah, I thought it was definitely a potentiality in the piece overall. But yeah, I haven't got into the whole synopsis or anything like that. Who else read the fucking thing? Any thoughts? Because I mean, that I will admit that is a bit, you know, because we don't really get to know the female love interest that well. I mean, we get a little bit, but only really through our protagonist's perspective. But let's presume that when he thinks that she's smirking when he's not looking and all that, let's assume he's just right. You know, just because he's paranoid doesn't mean that he isn't right. If she is like that, it does make me wonder whether she was just, I mean, she's childish or childlike in terms of, like, she seems to gain pleasure from driving him a bit insane. Although I would argue that it's somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy on Castell's part, because he thinks no one can understand him, you know, and his paintings and all this. And it seems very almost on the nose that the painting that they bond over is called motherhood. What, I can't remember what that would be in Spanish. I don't think it's matridad. It's something like that. But yeah, I mean the symbolism there is as blindingly obvious as the fact that Maria Irovani is married to a blind man. And the blind man kind of thing is, again, House of Leaves that happens. Dante. It all kind of originates back from there. But and even lines like deceiving a blind man, and it's you got to question which one of them's really blind in the end. I mean, you would probably say that he is the most blind, considering the fact that it is somewhat agreed amongst some analyses that her actual husband is happy to be a cuck in some. Although I would question that. I don't actually think that is that obvious. I mean, he calls him an idiot and a fool and all this kind of stuff, and it seems to suggest that, yeah, he probably knew about it. But again, that lends itself more toward my point, I think, about Maria potentially propagating the likelihood of her own harm by having an affair and by marrying a fucking blind man in the first place, especially one that she knew she could use as a comfort whilst she just went around doing what she wanted. You know, I mean, that's the problem with freedom a lot of the time, is if you do go around just doing what you want, especially when it comes to sexual exploits or even, you know, I mean, you can't do so without feeling as if you're using another being, unless you're a total psycho. And even then, I would argue that there's a element of you feel like you're being or that you're giving yourself away somewhat. So, I mean, freedom comes with consequence, I suppose. But when you act like it doesn't, the guilt that could build up could make you then seek more danger, essentially, because you're looking for punishment. You know, that's kind of. I mean, this is probably diving a little bit too deep into the whole thing, but I don't know. That's how I entertain myself, like analysing it, I suppose. But it is a damn good book. And I'm not saying it isn't because of the book that I'm thinking these things. It's definitely because of it. Because it like he says during it, it's like when everything starts to go wrong and he just kind of openly admits, like, there are times when I just want to... Basically, I want to get shit-faced. It's kind of what he says. He's just like, he wants to give in to every vice that he's ever been tempted by all in one night. It's like a bender kind of thing. He wants to get drunk, fucking tell people they're cunts to their face in bars, smoke, pick up hookers, wake up in a gutter, like everything, all in one giant, like, self-destructive act of glory, in a sense. And yeah, I mean, I can certainly relate to that want and just need to get out of your own head, for sure. I think obviously yeah, our painter takes it to the pretty end level of extreme, but I mean, that's his character to a T, isn't it, really? The way he obsesses over Maria. There's just one woman who happened to be looking at a certain section of his fucking painting, and then he assumes that she's the only one who sees what he was trying to do, and he obsesses. He imagines that he's going to meet her. He manifests her to an extent which I definitely feel like feeds into his grandiosity. I mean, this is a book, actually, I would love to hear Sam Vaknin's views on this one, because I definitely feel like he's like a shit narcissist, I would say. He's definitely very narcissistic, but when it comes to the female sex, he's like a bumbling wreck of a kind of spoiled child, which is narcissistic as well, I would argue. And Maria is, I don't know, I mean, she comes across as the kind of vixen, femme fatale, dead mother to me. It's like she knows what she brings, and that is. I think I made a slight mistake because there is a film of this, which I didn't realise, to be honest. Even a few, like the film I talked about, The Holdovers. The director of that made a version of this that he adapted that I can't remember the title of, but it is basically based on The Tunnel, but it's got a more of a light-hearted comedic vibe, I think, from what I can tell. But there is actually another version, and they have quite an attractive woman playing Maria. But my impression was that, yeah, she's attractive, but there's something about her that is also deathly, I suppose. I think I always imagine her as like pale, almost like with the kind of almost skeletal in face, you know, so kind of gaunt, but still striking, you know. So she's beautiful or whatever, but at the same time almost unhealthy looking, deathly. So it's like I think she invites that, or at least that's what I conjured. But when I was reading it, he does mention her being beautiful, although it's briefed over again. Like I don't really think he indulges too much in what her appearance is like overall. She's just, you know, mid to late 20s, and that's about it. Like you don't really know much else. You assume she's petite, I suppose, but I don't know. Maybe every reader actually pushes their own idea onto it. Well, it's interesting you say it in that way, because I feel like the novel attempts to describe everything in a very cutthroat, to the point manner, and yet because of the illogical thought patterns of our protagonist, we still get lost in a spiral when it comes to the trajectory of the piece. I mean, we know from the off, yeah, he's the one who's killed this woman, but I mean, is it really a spoiler? I don't think so. I think it's just setting up. We're aware that this is going to happen. The interest in the story is how. So in a kind of less obvious way, it's like a kind of murder mystery where you already know the ending. It's how you get there. But really what's interesting is how he interprets it, or how he remembers how it all happened. And really there's a lot of holes in there, I would imagine, at least, because he even has a line in it that was so fucking Roger. It was crazy. It's something about his supreme memory or something. I was just like looking at it going, oh, I wish I should have made a note of that. It's like my normally exquisite or immaculate memory or something like that. It's just like, the fuck? It's like, maybe that's what's very intriguing in some ways, because it's almost like the more insular or internal you can get, but if you're too proud about everything, especially the way you see the world and whatnot, it's just, yeah, pure narcissism and delusion above all else. I mean, and yeah, I mean he starts talking about his dreams. He imagines himself as a fucking giant bird at one point, but no one else knows that he's a bird. They treat him like as if he's normal, but to him and what he's saying, it's all gobbledygook kind of thing. But everyone else it's very Kafka actually, but pretty funny at the same time. And then the whole thing when he goes to post a letter at the post office, then he realizes that he's made an error, or he just regrets what he says in it, so he tries to like take it back, and then he just has this massive argument with the clerk there, and it's hilarious. And he's too proud to beg, and yet at the same time he's still willing to kind of half humiliate himself in order to get what he wants back. Like he can't stick to his own mindset a lot of the time. Like he's very capricious, I suppose. He is like a capricious storm where it is constantly threatening, like, but he never quite delivers right until right at the end, obviously. I think the length of the novel is perfect, actually, because he would get annoying if you carried on too long in his mind. It wouldn't work because not really that much happens. Like a lot of it is full of his rants and diatribes about how people are, and their cliques and their little like sayings, usually involving the cliques, descriptions of things. Like I can relate to how insufferable that is for sure, but there was a slight danger of it becoming overly repetitive. I don't think it's actually repetitive, but it would feel that way the longer you go on, because there's only so much you can bitch and moan and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's pretty Notes from Underground, actually. It's Notes from Underground, but with more of a plot, I would argue. But it might be that one, yeah. I just remember I read about it, and I was actually quite surprised, because it was like I watched The Dirt. No, that's not the same. Forget that. Something else. But yeah, I remember I watched a few of the things, and then because I was reading this again, I was like, I think when I looked it up, obviously it comes up with a few things that, a couple, if there are movies or whatever, they're going to be the first things you find. And I watched the trailer for the film that they made in the 60s or something. It looked pretty shit, to be honest, so I'm not really bothered about watching that. I think it could make a great film, but it would have to be so dark. Like it would, I don't know, something. It could be neo-noir, sure, but I kind of think it should be slick. And I don't really think the focus is on the love story, oddly enough. I think it's far more on this crazy motherfucker. That would make it more interesting to me, because Maria isn't that interesting overall, except to him. So yeah, I'll do a bit of a reading, because that's kind of what. It should be sufficient to say that I am Juan Pablo Castel, the painter who killed Maria Irabane. I imagine that the trial is still in everyone's mind, and that no further information about myself is necessary. Granted, it is true that the devil himself cannot predict what people will remember, or why they remember it. I, for one, have never believed there is such a thing as collective memory, which may be one way humans protect themselves. The phrase, the good old days, does not mean that bad things happened less frequently in the past, only, fortunately, that people simply forget they happened. Obviously, that view is not universally accepted. I, for example, would characterize myself as a person who prefers to remember the bad things. I might even argue for the past as the bad old days, if it were not for the fact I consider the present as horrible as the past. I remember so many catastrophes, so many cynical and cruel faces, so many inhumane actions, that for me memory is a glaring light illuminating a sordid museum of shame. How often have I sat for hours in some dark corner of my studio, driven to despair by reading an account of some crime in the newspaper. Even so, it is not always in accounts of crimes that we find the most reprehensible acts of humankind. to a degree, criminals are the most decent and least offensive people among us. I do not make this statement because I myself killed another human being. It is my profound and honest conviction. Is a certain individual a menace to society? Then eliminate him and let that be an end to it. That is what I would call a good deed. Think how much worse it would be for society if that person were allowed to continue distilling his poison. Think how pointless it would be if instead of eliminating him you attempted to forestall him by means of anonymous letters or slander or other loathsome measures. As for myself, I frankly confess that I now regret not having used my time to better advantage when I was a free man. That is, for not having done away with 6 or 7 individuals I could name. It is a terrible world. That truism demands no demonstration. Nonetheless, I will offer a single example as proof. Some years ago, I read that in one of the concentration camps, when a former pianist complained of hunger, he was forced to eat a rat. A live rat. However, that is not the subject I want to discuss now. If the opportunity arises, I will have more to say on the subject of the rat. It's a pretty good opener. Can't deny it. It's a pretty good opener. You do get the. I mean, we know he's giving an account of what he's done. He mentions his studio, so we get an idea of his artistic kind of lifestyle or career, and we do get an impression of his outlook on humanity. Like, he claims it's not out of vanity, and yet I feel like he acts vain in how he describes it. So like there's some delicious kind of paradoxical ways of viewing things, which is actually how comedy works essentially. Like, you have a setup and then you defy that setup, so you do something that isn't expected. Whereas with his, it's all about the blind spots, which of course is very linked to the metaphor of the tunnel itself. It's like this total part of yourself that you can't see, and yet if you relate that part to others not being able to see it, then it almost creates more of a blind spot, as it were. I mean, I have to admit, there were parts of it when I was reading it, I felt sad, and I felt like, I mean, I'll be honest, I felt like I could relate to him too much, and probably my worst parts, like when you get into paranoid fucking exasperations with the world, with other people, with romantic interests, then everything else that you've been through comes up. It's like a fucking whirlwind, you know. And if you're depressed, if you're not happy with your situation and what's going on, then that can create very blind thoughts, I suppose. And then, but the problem is like, if you see things in a very black and white, splitting or dichotomous kind of way, it's like everything's a syllogism in it. It's like, because of this means that, and because of that, this means this, you know, kind of thing. And that way of thinking, which is definitely encouraged these days, in terms of the internet, seems to only think in these types of fashions. But I also think mental illness is also like that, which is, yeah, kind of an odd way to look at it, I suppose, in today's context at least. But being alone too long, and the mistake Castell makes often is he somewhat presumes the correctness of his convictions without much proof. Like, you don't really know whether Maria is sleeping with other men, as he assumes through it, but you also don't know whether he's wrong. So it kind of sets up this kind of miasmic kind of again, it's all to do with the tunnel. I mean, it's all to do with this kind of way of looking at. I mean, in a way, you could argue that the tunnel is a gas chamber. Not an echo chamber, because it's like he's blocking out all other thoughts, so they're just ricocheting off the edge of his like tunneled vision, and that is part of his major problem, essentially. Yeah, it's actually fucking. It's very, very good. Actually, the more like if I could actually, when I'd start nitpicking at it, and then when you think, there are other moments where that's so well sewn together. Even when they first meet, he takes a stick, and he starts just kind of drawing these metaphysical symbols or geometric kind of things. And again, that's almost creating the divide between them straight away, or like it also exemplifies his own mindset and the thought patterns of his mind. So it's got so many things going on with it. And there is a beautiful fucking and tragic metaphor to be had when it's describing him looking through his tunnel at Maria. And it's like the journey of their lives has been through this separate kind of way of being, and then at some point they come together. But then when things go wrong, he's the only one who can actually see her, and she becomes more distant. It's like it's fucking. I guess in some ways it does. I think it taps into the loneliness of the human condition. Like we all have that, really. Like we all just have this way of looking at the world and understanding it and blah blah blah, but it's all very much, it's inside, and it's at the same time as being untouchable by others, it's also it has that sense of being completely separate. Like I don't know what world you see. I can only assume it's similar to mine, and yet I don't know. You know, it's like one of those things that I don't really know. It's and that can extend to a lot of things. Like we all know where, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower is, but do we really? Like I mean, we just have a sense of it, you know, but we don't really know whether it's actually. It's like that tree falling in the woods kind of metaphor. It's like, is it really there if it's outside of my experience? I guess, yeah, we all know logically it is, but it might as well not be, because unless you're going to see it, what does it matter? You know, kind of lost my own point there, I think, a little bit, but but it does stand to reason when it comes to relationships and other human beings. And even when you read stuff like, if somebody relates to, say, I mean, colours, actually, like every different culture around the world has a different relationship to colours. So somebody from Japan would look at something brown, for instance, and they relate it to things. I'm making this up, but they do actually associated with different things to us, or to people in the West, in England. I mean, don't know what they do in the States, but there's this whole, and then you kind of think, well, and then you've still got the language barrier, which is, again, I think Castell brings up at one point, which is quite easy to overlook, because he says, like, well, if I was ranting to auditorium of Russians, they wouldn't have a fucking clue what I was saying, because he's speaking in, Spanish, but English in this regard. you know. And it's like, yeah, and that the language barrier is just the obvious thing. That's just the thing on the surface. It's like, yeah, obviously there's an issue there, but then you get below that, and it's more, if you did, it's the same. I suppose it falls into the philosophical argument. Like, if a lion could speak, you wouldn't understand what the fuck he was saying, mainly because the experience of the animal, in this instance a lion, is so far removed from your experience that they may as well be speaking Russian, for example. I feel like I've gone down a tunnel myself. I'm gonna I need to get out of this. But yeah, this is how fucking good the novel is. I mean, when I start to really go on about it, I mean, the things he goes on about, especially in terms of how alienating life is and how lonely another person can make you feel, I would argue, because I don't know whether Maria is reinforcing his own outlook, you know, his own worldview. Is it all a self-fulfilling prophecy? Does he pick her because he projects that she can see something in his painting that really he might only project that on her because he wants, you know, to get her in bed, basically? Because it's like, if it was a fat old chick or a dude or whatever, would he have projected this? No, of course he wouldn't. But he sees, you know, a young, petite, presumably submissive woman, and then it's like, oh my god, this woman understands me. Even as I watch from a distance, nobody else ever gets it, but oh, this hottie does. And it's a bit like, is it that way, you know? But again, it still comes back to the tragedy of fucking interpretation and perspective, and how lonely that is. I mean, this novel is actually, it probably isn't as well known and ubiquitous because of how savage it is. Like, it's kind of like the black pill version of The Stranger, you know. It's far more like on the edge of the abyss kind of thing. It's staring into that fucking abyss, whereas Camus' The Stranger only really does that right at the end, and it does it in this absurdist pussy way. It's like, oh yeah, just need to embrace the craziness, man. I'm gonna face that guillotine with a smile on my face, doing this kind of thing. It still has this kind of futile hope, Sisyphean bullshit, basically. Whereas this, I think, the ending of this is like, he's only been imprisoned like a couple of months, and he's literally going to be locked there for the rest of his fucking life. That's brutal. That is far more like he's going to have to ruminate on this forever, essentially. You know, I can't. It's actually, the bigger tragedy is that there isn't a good film with this. That there should be. There should be a fucking. Yeah, but if she was, you know, a pig, do you think he would have actually thought, oh, this senora, she understands it. There's no way he would have become as obsessed. Like, he wanted, because even in with what that part of the painting represented was very much about being seen. And I think he is looking. You could, if you want to get Freudian about it, I'd argue that he's looking for that mother replacement, because I don't think it's any mistake or coincidence that he doesn't mention shit all about his parents or about his own upbringing. He seems to be. He's so narcissistic. It's more like, I am, without, you know, there's no background to him. But but he's still clearly longing for some sort of for something, you know, whether it's a committed relationship or love overall, understanding, intimacy, whatever. It's like he wants it, but he tries to force it so much, and he is riding off of his mild notoriety, because, you know, he is a reasonably well-known painter, and that is apparently enough for Maria to have an affair with him. I mean, we can assume he isn't, you know, unattractive or whatever, but he does come across as an absolute fucking loon from the off, I would argue. I mean, he follows her, he tries to get in the elevator, he has this, I mean, he's so fucking shitbat that he can't talk to a woman. He goes on about how shy he is and all this, but then at the same time he's fine with stalking her. Then when he does approach her, he grabs her by the arm. Like, there could be a slight argument that maybe he's a bit autistic or something, or definitely something. He's so unhinged. It's like, oh, if I can't talk to her, then I'll just have to fucking grab her by the elbow and drag her down the street and basically just show her I mean business, kind of thing. Like, it's very warped kind of way of trying to connect to somebody. And then, you know, the only other time he approaches women is when they're prostitutes. So it's like, go figure, you know. It's I think his most relatable part is his desperation, actually, which is probably things that people don't really want to admit to, but I think everyone has felt that from time to time, and that's what leads us to make some pretty shitty decisions. And though his aren't, they're not relatable in the sense of what result he gets, but the feeling he has is certainly relatable. But most people don't want to admit this, you know, obviously. But that's what keeps you reading it, essentially, because we've all felt that from time to time, and it's made us. Loneliness is probably the biggest trigger for like some of the worst things we've ever decided to do, because yeah, it's it eats you alive, and then you fucking spit that out at others, and then if you're extraordinarily lucky, you might actually meet someone at the right time, and then you connect. Whereas I think I don't really know what I think of Maria, like, overall. Like, I kind of think she's fine, but I also do think she's a bit of a cunt overall. Like, I just think underneath it all, she gets off on not just fucking him around, but I think she just gets off on this whole, oh, look at what I can make guys do, you know. Doesn't matter if it's some blind rich twat, a fucking artist, or even my cousin, potentially. I can just wrap them around my little finger. And that's my own misogynistic projection, I'll admit. But I definitely feel that there's a part of that in her. And that's why I think she goes with it, because I do think she's fucking playing with fire overall, pretty much. And she does so with the wrong man overall. I mean, it seems very symbolic that she comes back by train near the end of the piece, and then immediately decides, no, I'm going back. Like, she changed, and that, I mean, really, that's the thing that seals her fate, ironically. It's like she has it, she thinks better of it all, but she's already made the travel, and I think making that journey has already nipped it in the bud, essentially. It's like the moment she decided, oh, I'm not actually going to meet him, I'm going to go back to the Estancia or whatever, that was when she triggered him into going there himself and stabbing a bitch a new one, you know. So far during the book club, it's hands down the best piece. And this is the kind of difference, I would say. I mean, Cows is great in its own right because it can keep you very intrigued, even though it is very transgressive and, yeah, scatological, let's say. And it does have a good story to tell. Like, it's definitely, it has an isolated, but it's also very comedic and, yeah, body horror kind of type thing. Pen Pal was a good horror, but I would argue for what should be known as teenagers, but what is now known as young adults. Basically, that's what that is. It's good for what it is. Whereas The Tunnel is literature. And I'll sound as pompous as the fucking dude in it, but there's certain passages in it where you do actually have to kind of look over them again and just think, okay, what? I thought I was on point of what he was going on about then, but I'm gonna have to kind of go back on that. And just like metaphorically speaking, it's got a lot going on in it overall, and it's very. I think the ingenuity of it is disguised by how simplistic the language appears. Like, yeah, it is very matter of fact to a degree, but then when it actually starts to delve into the metaphysical or the conscious, it starts to get very muddled, and yet it still feels controlled to a certain extent. And that's why, I mean, for a piece that's so short as well, I think it is something to marvel at quite a bit. But it is also, like, by extension, it is very fascinating to me that around this kind of era, you know, either pre or post World War II, there was a lot of these types of novels around. And I suppose it makes you wonder, like, is it because you saw so much indifference in the world or the universe because it was so surrounded by death? Did that make people more self-serving? Was it because of the rise of the individual in society as opposed to the collective which we once had? And like I read in the fucking first chapter there, it seems like he goes against the collective. He thinks this whole collective memory thing is bollocks, you know. But that's because it's all about the individual, baby. You know, in the last 50 odd years, it's been like the word I even start to gain far more prominence, and it's all, you know, your journey, your life, what you should do, you, that kind of thing. It keeps kind of extending, and yet every individual wants to connect to another individual, so it's prescient even, potentially. I mean, the Tenant would be a good one, I have to admit. I've been eyeing up my copy of it. I could read that. I've read a few others recently. Try and find it on here. I mean, I'm not going to go on about them. I don't think I've got too much else to say about The Tunnel. I think it's a bit obvious that I like it. So, if you haven't ever read it, I definitely recommend checking it out. Lot to analyse, but if you're a fan of like Kafka, Dostoevsky, Camus, and even some degree, like in modern terms, I suppose how would I word it? Because you could definitely see somebody like this falling down the rabbit hole of the manosphere or something like that. Like he gives off those kind of vibes, and whether he's a creator or just consumer of it, you could definitely see how it would influence his mindset. And I don't say it just taking the piss, but you know, Elliot Rodger could be his relative essentially. Like he's definitely got that. It's almost like a gene in there where it's like either the paranoid side, the too proud side, the narcissist side, the fucking psychopath side. Just a little bit. And yeah, and well, certainly the ego part of it. To start a novel saying other people's vanity disgusts him. This novel I'm writing isn't out of vanity. It's like, yeah, of course it is. It's like any writer or artist in general has a degree of narcissism, of course. Because when you create something out of nothing, you're deciding to be God. So it's like, of course there's an element. I mean, you can say, oh, but there's good narcissism and bad, blah, blah, blah. But fuck all that. Like, it's still just, don't make it between good and evil. It's just how it is, you know? And I still think a healthier version regardless, you know, depending on, well, I mean, if you penned a manifesto because you planned on going on a massacre the next day, then no. But if you actually plan on making it a piece that lives separately from you, then yes. But yeah, I mean, if anyone else, I don't know. Painbow's disappeared. I don't know what's going on. Thought he'd be here. Did I ban him? I don't know. You start a book club, and then the people who apparently interested in it all fuck off. So that's nice. That's nice. But yeah, whatever. I'm gonna go on about what I. Oh, he's on holiday. I was going to read through some of the the 1-star reviews just for a laugh. Alright, let's have a look. Ah, where are they? Okay. Okay, so again, Arabic, fuck off. German, fuck off. Okay. Okay, that's a long 1-star. Once upon a time, not that long ago, there was a man. He was a misogynist and an entitled prick. A painter. He criticised everyone who liked his work and those who didn't. He hated himself and he hated everyone else. One fine day, he met a woman looking at his picture and decided she alone understood his feelings for the painting. I know The Tunnel is some sort of classic, but this is a genuinely terrible sexist book. It might have been better if some understanding of why Castell became such an arsehole was given. As such, there is nothing about why he became a misogynistic prick. Only how he thought after he is one. So I found the book to be of no value in that sense. The terribly convoluted ruminations of the protagonist were also pretty annoying. Overall, there is nothing interesting in Castell's ideas or thoughts, and nothing original. You come across these men, and you know they are a product of a patriarchal society. I think I might have reacted better to this if this was about the victim, Maria. Okay. A misandrous viewpoint. Beautiful. But I think the worst of this book is that it was boring and couldn't keep my interest. Mercifully, it was short and I just sped, admittedly stifling my yawns to the end. And yet you wrote quite a long review. It's interesting. Just 0 stars from Nazanin. Nice one. Nunca me había sentido tan feliz por terminar un libro. Que señor tan insoportable. Bro just needed therapy. Of course. Bro just needed therapy. Yeah. The woke woman's answer to fucking everything. Fuck off. Okay, what was I going to look at reading? Okay, so I'm currently reading I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I've only just started it, obviously, 11%. It's not bad so far. It's not bad. It's a little bit what you would see published nowadays, if that makes sense. But so far, I'm actually kind of enjoying it. It's all right. It might be because I actually think the film's quite good. And ever since watching it, I was always kind of intrigued as to what I would think of the book. And I'm seeing similarities, but there are moments where it seems to be talking about something else entirely, and that is interesting so far. There's a whole part going on that isn't in the film, or at least it's not in the same way. So I'm intrigued by that. Come Closer was, I liked how it started overall, but in the end I thought it was pretty generic, trashy. I could be really harsh and say it's about a woman who hits the wall and then blames everything on demons. Yeah, it's okay. It's kind of fun in a way, but it's about demonic possession, kind of. But that's about it. I mean, there's not really anything else going on. So there's a woman who has a pretty idyllic life, if not quite a boring one, who starts to listen to her alter ego, demon, mental illness, like whatever you want to, paint it as. But I felt like the book was hinting at it all being kind of part of a mental disorder, and yet it just kind of settled on, nah, it's just a demon. Just a demon. It was all right. I won't shit on it too much. If you want a quick read about that kind of thing, it's fine. It's kind of intriguing, but it's got nothing new in it. It kind of felt like I was watching a film I'd seen before, if that makes sense. The rest of them, The Pussy is alright. I want to be Bukowski, basically. Clearly obvious, influenced by him, but it got a bit grating after a while, like it was just the same shit over and over again. But I felt that kind of demonstrated modernity quite well. Yeah, not bad. Obviously, I think I've talked about The Slob, maybe The Bear, can't remember, but got nothing else to say about them at this moment. And I suppose now is when I need to decide what the what's the next book? Painbow is on holiday and he's not tuning into my fucking stream. What a prick. How do you know he's on holiday? Yeah, the physical copy's there. Rejected. No, we're not reading On the Fucking Road. Or the... Nah, we're not. Kerouac can suck my dick. Next. Maybe one day, but no, I'm not interested in reading that. Come on then, what have you got? What have you got? What do you want to read? Time's ticking. I'll decide if you don't, you know, suggest. I mean, I'm very tempted to pick up Stoner again at the moment. Read the first few pages of it while I was having a shit the other day, and I was just like, yeah, this is a novel for sure. Bukowski. He goes on about reading literature, and then he suggests Bukowski, a man who was never accepted into literary circles. Drowning. Right, let me have a look at this. Is this by a Chinese person? I don't know why I'm saying that with racial. Oh, for fuck's sake. It's even 80 pages. I like that. Well, this particular short story reminded me of Holden Caulfield in Catcher in the Rye. The main character in Sinking, as I assume it's also known, is very much like Holden in that they both struggled with isolation and desolation despite being amidst the presence of their peers in school. Someone else said, sad, 2 stars. While very much interested in girls, he is not able to speak to any and resorts to voyeurism and onanism. I believe that's masturbation, for which he feels deeply ashamed but cannot escape the habit. Thus he spirals further into depression and self-loathing to the point of suicide. Chinese incel moves to Japan to pursue his studies in the countryside while hating his nation and ethnicity for the hatred it brings to him. To be honest, I mean, a lot of people hate the Chinese, and rightly so. But he loves the nature around him and describes it in pretty words. That's all I managed to enjoy here. His troubles are so mundane, ultimately, that it's hard to empathise with him. That being said, the themes of loneliness are universal, regardless of culture, and that I can and did relate to. This was my introduction to Chinese literature, and I hope it leads me to more, further fleshed other works. That sounds interesting. Well, all right. I'm gonna read. I'll read this. I mean, it's short. It sounds like it would only take a couple of days, if that. But I'm not sure I'm gonna make it a topic. If you know what I mean. So yeah, I mean, I'd say Stoner. If you haven't read Stoner, then come on. Or let me throw this one out. This is one Tommy and I mentioned this. Fuckboy. Fuccboi. Let's see what it says about this. A fearless and savagely funny examination of masculinity under late capitalism from an electrifying new voice. Set in Philly 1 year into Trump's presidency, Sean Thor Conroy's audacious freewheeling debut follows our eponymous fuckboy, Sean, as he attempts to live meaningfully in a world that doesn't seem to need him. Reconciling past failed selves, cross-country walker, SoundCloud rapper, weed farmer, he now finds himself back in his college city, trying to ride, doing stimulant-fueled bike deliveries to eat. Unable to accept that his ex has dropped him, yet still engaged in all the same fuckery, being coy and spineless, dodging decisions, maintaining a rotation of bows that led to her leaving in the first place. But now Sean has begun to wonder, how sustainable is this mode? How much fuckery is too much fuckery? Written in a righteous, utterly original idiom and slyly undercutting both the hypocrisy of our era and that of Sean himself, Fuckboy is an unvarnished, playful and searching examination of what it means to be a man. To be honest, the synopsis made it sound a bit shite, but lots of mixed write-ups. I've had diarrhea that was more enjoyable. Katie Books. The mad Muslim himself. I bet he's had a lot of diarrhea, that man. Working at McDonald's. And believing in a lot of shite. So he's had a lot of diarrhea regurgitate out of his mouth, I'll tell you that much. Ugh. Alright, we're reading Stoner. Stoner it is. But I might read that anyway. I might review it. Who knows? I'm feeling crazy. But I'll probably read Drowning as well. So, let me just... Yeah, there it is. Oh, apparently, what's this? Oh. Casey Affleck set to star in Joe Wright directed adaptation of John Williams's novel. Not sure what I make of that, to be honest, but I don't think he's the right guy for it, personally. Although maybe I don't know. I could see him, the younger version of him could work when he's a child, but when he's older, don't think so, personally. But yeah. But yeah, ignore all that shit for now and just read the fucking book. And I'll try to read the others mentioned. I don't know, maybe at some point we can let me just put that there for now. Okay, so the tunnel's done. Stoner would be the longest so far. Let me see. I mean, this is the copy I've got. I think even I think the spine's even broken. No, I think it's all right. It's all right. No worry. No panic. All right. This is just under 300, so that's fine. Couple of weeks, should be able to piss through that. Yeah, Stoner it is. I mean, I'll tell you already, it's the best novel featured, but well, that's it. Yeah, Stoner. I don't have anything else to say. I'm thinking about it, but since this is a book club stream, it doesn't seem appropriate to mention other things other than books. But yeah, if you become a patron or if you donate, then you can just vote for what you want, and I will feature it. You know. But since I get shit all, then I'm gonna decide what is on the list. All right, and that's about it. So yeah, next week we're going to be doing another Cop and Steve, of course. That's about all I have to say. It's not that I refuse to read it, it's more that I'm not I've read about, I think, 30 or 40 pages of it. It's alright. It's got that Americana feel that I don't know, it kind of just rubs me the wrong way a little bit. It just feels a bit wanky, if I'm honest. It's alright, but it's basically about a dude trying to be a writer or wants to be a writer. I can't really remember, but then he's just cruising around, living this kind of road trip existence, and I'm just a bit like, fuck off. Yeah, I haven't really got much else. I mean, I can't judge it too much. It might actually be quite good, but I think everything surrounding it puts me off a little bit. So, but I'm willing to admit that I could be very wrong. I'll keep it in mind. Okay, that's about it. But for now, we're going to read Stoner next, and then maybe No Longer Human. That is another one I briefly picked up again not too long ago, and I would be intrigued to see what I think of that now, because yeah, Yoba Ozo I think might actually get on my tits a little bit, but we'll see. But yeah, if anyone else, if you have any other suggestions, I mean, I don't really want it to just be your typical kind of literary pieces, although obviously I think that's going to come into the fray more often than not. I am intrigued to check out some of these novels that are doing well these days, mainly for my own benefit. I'll be honest, because I'm kind of looking at it thinking like, okay, I can do this better. I just need to figure out how to do the marketing. So it's like, okay, so how do I do that? Read the fucking novel first, and then try to figure out what is it about it that's made it somewhat well known. I mean, Fuckboy, 260 reviews, 1100 ratings. It's nothing groundbreaking, I would say, but it's still a lot better than what I've managed to garner thus far, and it sounds like it's a load of shit. So I need to know, what is it? And it's interesting that you're saying, oh, these novels are crap, whatever. I think they're a lot easier to judge when they're new, and especially when they are internet related. I think someone like KD would be very prone to calling it shite because it doesn't have a accolade behind it or a stamp saying that it's good or whatever. I'm not casting aspersions or anything, but I think it's good to throw in a few things that we can just talk about, because I mean, Stoner is going to be fine to discuss and whatnot, but it is really good. So it's like, let's all agree that it's great. Whereas in some ways, newer I mean, Stoner, the interesting thing with Stoner is it was published quite a while back, and it's kind of crept into the public eye probably over the last 10-15 years. I mean, obviously there were other critics praising it and whatnot, but it's definitely become more well known of recent year, and that's great. That's what you kind of want. Any great novel, you kind of hope that that's what's going to happen. It's probably not the case, but whatever. Whereas with newer stuff, I think people are quicker to judge it or jump on it, especially when it has a unique style or whatever. And I think anything brave enough to try and document the current time we're in is interesting in its own right, because everyone's worldview is individualized and atomized nowadays. So, yeah, whatever, as the translation of Michelle Welbeck's book would say. But also, I mean, I would actually say it's worth a read. There's a great bit in this. This cover's fucking trash, by the way. I hate this fucking cover, but there's a great bit in it when the guy tries to convince this ugly dude to basically kill this girl. He's like in a club, like, she's never gonna go with you, dude. It's proper like incel shit. Why don't you just take it? Go on a little knife fucking pie for one kind of thing. And he has this rage against psychoanalysts, which I love. It's like they get these women go into therapy, and then they come out cunts. And they come out selfish, self-serving, only give a shit about themselves, like everything about it. And it's like, yeah, that is exactly what therapy is all about, baby. He was on the money. As for the rest of the novel, it's not even really a novel, but yeah, it's pretty good. I could read that again. I don't know whether you're suggesting it, but I'd rather read her first novel, because that was the one that what was it called? Made a film of it that's apparently a bit shit, but someone say what was her fucking first book? I could look it up, but can't be fucked. It's just a name. It's a girl's name. I think it begins with E. I could be wrong. Someone just say. I can get the fuck out of here then. Eileen, thank you. That's what it is. Eileen. Yeah, we could read that. But yeah, let's start. We'll go with Stoner, and then maybe every fifth novel we'll actually read a female author. I know I don't really want to have to put you through this, but to keep fair or whatever, or to give the ladies a chance, is like to be very modern. We let them, play football and work and stuff like that these days. So maybe we can give them a go with literature. Who knows? They might have come up with something half decent. I'm not counting on it, to be honest, but yeah, we can read some Harry Potter, or maybe some Twilight, or what else do women like to write? 50 Shades of Grey, that could be in there. Maybe some Hunger Games. I mean, this is the kind of stuff women love to write, children's books. But that's fine. I'm all right with that. We can just carry on. They could be like the light breather of the book club. Just read some kiddie porn, basically, or fantasies about billionaires or vampires and fucking wizards and shit. That's what, or incest. Maybe VC Andrews. That could work. That's what women love to write. So, in the interest of fairness, I mean, I can't think of anything else, if I'm honest. I don't think they've ever tried to write an adult book. So have you ever read any Anais Nin? It's not easy. I tried. It was painful. Same with that bitch. Fucking hell, what a drag. I'd rather read Harry Potter than Susan Sontag. She can fuck right off. Obviously, I'm joking. Somewhat. Maybe. Thanks, babe. I'll hold a wand right in front of your face. How about that? No, yeah, we will. Trying to think of. Well, I mean, saying all of that, Frankenstein, I wouldn't mind rereading. That could be a good one. No one cares about Frankenstein anymore, but they should. It's great. Wuthering Heights, maybe at some point. I don't know. Donna Tartt, but Donna Tartt's novels are fucking long, so I don't think it would be good for the club. Maybe if we all mention having read her, then fine. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm out. I was gonna fucking get out of here after an hour and a half. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for not donating. That's very nice. That gives me encouragement to continue with this. You know, because I can live on crumbs. Did you know? Like, I can eat lint. I actually survive. I'm a breatharian. I don't need to eat or anything else. I can just, you know, drink my own urine and eat my own shit, and that's how I survive. So cheers for that. Yeah, until Stoner will be good. Although, to be honest, that's just going to be me saying, yeah, this novel's really good. So I'll probably read Drowning as well, just to have something to say. Stoner is always 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now. And yeah. Oh, I'm looking forward to it. It's a gorgeous novel. Makes me think we should also read The Tartar Steppe, actually, as well. But yeah, I mean, if I don't get any donations for this shit, I'm thinking like the Copensieve is gonna be that's gonna take over. Fuck the book club. Fuck the book club. You want a book club? Anyway, alright, cheers for watching, and well, I'll see you next week. Go figure. Yeah. Have a good the rest of the weekend and all that bullshit. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.